Hi and welcome into the most comprehensive chess tactics guide. Chess tactics may feel complicated with over 50 different tactical motifs and thousands of different chess puzzles that you're expected to solve in order to learn all these common patterns of chess. Now, in this video, I'm going to present to you a simple system that you can use in order to spot tactics in your own games and also not to overlook tactics from the side of your opponent. And again, I'm going to present you a complete system so that we're going from A to Z and break it down step by step, initially just so that you can understand it fully, and after that I'm going to show you how you can use it in seconds in your real-life games. But first of all, what is chess tactics? It implies short-term operations aiming to get some immediate advantage, such as checkmating an opponent's king or winning material. In contrast to this, chess strategy aims to improve your position gradually, accumulate those small advantages that will, hopefully, ultimately give you a winning position. Let me also address one common problem with chess tactical puzzles. While solving a tactical puzzle, you know that there is a winning combo, that there is probably a sacrifice, and you start looking for those moves that give up material that you wouldn't consider otherwise. And so even if you manage to solve those tactical puzzles, it doesn't guarantee at all that you will be able to find combinations in your real-life games. And for that reason, the system that I'm about to present to you is a universal system. It allows you to find combinations, tactics, as well as simple, normal moves. And it works, all around. All right, let's take a look at this position, which is taken from the game between Avi, a former world champ, against Abdul, a less known opponent. It is white to play. So, first of all, there is one precondition that helps you to find tactics in your games. And that precondition is that you gotta seek for attacking moves. You gotta always be on the lookout for attacking moves because attack wins the game. That's gotta be your mindset when you're going for the game of chess. Like, how do I attack? Because the traditional way of thinking of chess players is a bit different. People start looking at their pieces and start thinking, where can those pieces be moved, and what can you do here? So you kind of look at your position and start thinking, what are you going to do about that? Now, the way that I'm suggesting you to think is actually the opposite. Instead of thinking about your position, you pay attention to opponent's side of the board, to the other half of the board, and you ask yourself, like, how do I go there into opponent's side of the board and take or attack something there? So again, it's just a shift of your mindset where you shift from finding good moves to attacking mode, okay? Now, when you're in this set of, attack, you start looking for moves that are only creating threats on opponent's half of the board. And that helps you a lot because attacking moves are the most powerful, but it also limits the options that you have. For example, in this case, if you're thinking about moves on opponent's half of the board and you start thinking about them, there aren't that many options really, right? So what can you do here? I mean, the knight can come here, maybe the pawn can come forward. The rook may possibly go forward. That would be a sacrifice I'll need to calculate, but there are just a handful of options really. And so it's really simple to notice them. And that's how you find attacking moves, regardless of whether there is some sacrifice involved or not. Here is also the first main idea that helps you to understand if you should even consider sacrifices or not. And that idea is weaknesses. When you see weaknesses in an opponent's position, it is a trigger for you to start thinking that, hey, maybe I can actually take advantage of them and go into the attack right away. What kind of weaknesses exist in chess? There are three of them. The first is a weak king, which is an exposed or a restricted king. The second type of weakness are hanging pieces, which are pieces without sufficient defense, which are not really well coordinated where they defend each other, but they are a little bit distant from each other and they can possibly be captured. So in this case, we can see that queen and rook are somewhat hanging pieces, even though the queen currently defends the rook, but it's still shaky. And the third type of weakness are weak pawns and squares. For example, this pawn on f6 is weak, and if black just moves their queen away, you'll be able to capture it. A weak pawn or square is a square on opponent's half of the board which is not defended and ideally cannot be defended by a pawn. For example, the e6 square is weak. You can easily land your knight there. In contrast to this, if you're looking at the square on e5, you cannot place your piece there because if you do, your opponent will just grab it. So it's not weak. But the square e6 is indeed weak, so as the pawn on f6. there are also some other weaknesses in black's position here all around. Usually we're focusing on the 5th and 6th rank when you're looking at the position, and you try to spot weaknesses there, those pawns and squares which are undefended by opponent's pawn. Alright, so in this position, for example, I'd say that probably these are like the major weaknesses, this pawn on f6 as well as a couple squares, e6 and h6. Now, in this position, we can see that black has all 3 types of weaknesses combined. Their king is exposed, the pieces are hanging, and there are weak squares, especially in the close proximity to the king. And that is a trigger for you to think that there can be potentially some winning combination or winning attack here. And so that's step number 1. You start thinking about weaknesses, and as soon as you notice that there are weaknesses in opponent's position, then it brings us to the step number 2, which is candidate moves. And here's a helpful tip about your candidate moves. You want to check forcing moves first of all, those moves that force a particular response of your opponent. And there are 3 types of forcing moves in chess, which are checks, captures, and threats. And I've just named them in the order of significance. Like check is the most forcing move. If you deliver a check to opponent's king, for example, queen takes 7 is a bad move, but it's just an example of a check. If you deliver a check, your opponent has nothing to do but to respond, and therefore opponent's options are extremely limited. Right? The next type of a forcing move is a capture. Again, if let's say you capture here, again, it's a bad move in a particular case, but I'm just illustrating the point, your opponent will usually have to recapture. And so it's easy for you to calculate this because there is only one line you need to consider. And the final idea is threats, attacking moves. They're less forcing because your opponent may have options, but still they are forcing the opponent to react, usually. Now, so what are the moves that you gotta consider here? Again, we're looking for attacking moves on opponent's half of the board that will take or attack something. Now, with the queen, we can take here or here, but black just recaptures and it doesn't really do anything. If you play knight to e6, this is a candidate move definitely worth considering. It's an attacking move, attacks the rook here twice. If black takes here on e6, then we will recapture, and it looks very good for white actually, because now your rook comes into play, attacks the queen, attacks here, the rook is shaky, so it's all good. But after knight e6, if we're looking at this position once again, there is rook e8, and it's actually annoying because it attacks our pieces along this file, and probably black is going to win some material here on the next move, something like this, rook takes e6, and black will win material. So knight e6 was a good move to consider, but it doesn't work in the current case. What else do we have here? There is a move pawn h5, which is a somewhat attacking move on opponent's half of the board, but it does not create an immediate threat, even though it's worth considering it. But again, I would leave this move for the last. So if more forced moves don't work, then you may consider this move. Maybe you're gonna take here, or maybe you want to push forward h6 and just limit opponent's king, put the king in the cage and maybe checkmate later. But again, the disadvantage of this move is that it's the least forced move. Now your opponent has time to do something, and again, black will probably play rook e8 and take advantage of this. So in this case, it's actually bad. Now the final option that we have, and that is also a forced move that you need to consider, is rook to e6. Even though it sacrifices a rook, but since we notice that black has a number of weaknesses in the position, which triggers you to think about potentially winning attack, it's worth considering this move. Now rook e6 hits the queen, hits the pawn, black has to do something, black has to take. Now what do? You recapture, and it hits this rook, it also threatens queen g7, and it's all over. So black just resigned. That's the complete system of how you find proper attacking moves, as well as sacrifices, in a real-life game, regardless of whether you know that there is a combination there or not. Okay, here is the next example, and once again, let's not just try guessing the right move, but apply the right system that you can use in your own games just as well. It is black to play, and the first thing to think about is, are there any weaknesses in white's position? Are there any signs that you can start thinking about potential tactics or attack in this position? Well, indeed, in this case, we can see that the king is restricted, while most of your pieces are targeting it already. Therefore, definitely it looks dangerous for white. I mean, this pawn on a3 is also weak, but probably it's a bit too slow for this position. Anyway, so the king is weak, we may start thinking about some tactics here. Now, how do we find tactics? Well, we look for forcing moves, checks, captures, and attacking moves. Are there any checks here? Well, there is queen takes h2. Obviously that gives up the queen, but after that, if king takes, we've got knight g4 follow-up, so it's worth considering. And again, since we detected that there can be potential tactics here, it's worth considering sacrifices. Now, aside of queen takes h2, is there anything else? The next thing to consider are captures. We've got rook takes g2, but I mean, I don't like it too much. Well, it just recaptures, and it doesn't seem like black achieved anything. In fact, this rook became more active, so that's probably bad. Now, is there anything else? We do have this capture rook takes a3. We may keep it on the back of our mind, but again, I don't like it too much, feels slow. Now, here we come to attacking moves. Are there any attacking moves that black can play? Well, there is knight g4, right, threatening queen h2 or threatening knight f2, smaller checkmate. So knight g4 is an interesting option. Is there anything else? And finally, I can see rook to h3, also kind of interesting, you know, forcing everything against this pawn on h2. So that's also something worth considering. So now we find our candidate moves, which are queen takes h2, knight g4, and rook to h3. So we've got 3. And if one of them works, you want to play one of those, because if there is an effective attacking move, it's usually the strongest option. If none of these things work, then you'll have to settle for a more simple move. Now, which move do you calculate first? Well, the most forcing one, which is check. So we got to start from queen takes h2. It's the simplest one to calculate because white is forced to recapture. Now, what do you do then? Well, knight g4 is the only check you can deliver here. King goes to h1. What can we do here? Well, there is knight f2 check, but after that, if king comes back, I'm not sure what we can do, but we've got the perpetual check here. Well, that's already something. We can just repeat moves and achieve a draw, which is nice because in the starting position, white was 2 pawns up. Is there anything else? Well, there is another forcing move, rook h3 check to the king, and after this, we've got this nice checkmate. So we done it. We solved the puzzle. That's the solution. And you know what's the beauty of this thing? Let's come back all the way to the beginning of this puzzle to this position. You don't even have to know all those like 50 or more of chess tactical motifs, you know, because I'm a grandmaster and I'll probably won't be able to tell you all 50, or like regardless of how many of them do exist. So for example, queen h2, I'm not even sure, like, is it to destroy white's casting, or is it I don't know, attract the king to a vulnerable square? I'm not even sure what tactical motif is this, but the point is you don't even have to know this, right? Because you're just following the system. You detect weaknesses. If they exist, you start looking for forcing moves, and then you look for a couple of candidate options, and if one of them works, cool, you win. Here's the next puzzle where you can try the system practically and check if you can find the winning continuation for white, and if so, please write it in the comments down below. Also, if you want to achieve your chess goals in the fastest way possible, you may click the link below the video and join the waitlist for the course 7 Keys to Victory. That's one of my most flagship courses that teaches you step by step how to advance in chess all the way up to an expert level. The next enrollment will be opened for a limited time for the next cohort of students, so if you're interested, join the waitlist right now, and as soon as the enrollment is available, we'll be able to notify you, and then you'll be able to decide if you want to join us or not. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it was valuable. Wishing you all the best. Take care.